Is photography dying? That's a hell of a question. In this video, I'm going to have a look at the various pressures that have been working on photography throughout my career. So in 1976, my father gave me this camera. It's a little stunner, actually. It had been his camera, and he had upgraded. Let me get that camera. He had upgraded to this camera. And this was kind of state of the art in 1976. And I started taking photographs with this camera in 1976. Like seriously taking photographs. I went from I'm going to be an astronaut to I'm going to be a photographer in the space of about 2 days, which probably tells you more about my character than it does about photography. But anyway, within 3 months of picking photography up as a hobby, I made my first sale to a local newspaper, the Dundee Courier. I took the camera out to a school sports day, Dundee High School, took photographs of my friends running around the track and so on, made some prints and thought, wow, these photographs were really good. This is what newspapers would buy. And I managed to get an appointment to see the editor of the newspaper, a man called Alan Dawson. Weirdly, I remember his name. And he bought the photographs for 40 Rand. A fortune to me, a fortune in those days. And that was pretty much it. That was my career set. That's all I wanted to do after that, was to be a photographer. At the age of 16, some 2 years later, I was commissioned to shoot my first wedding. Who would actually ask a 16-year-old to photograph their wedding? Who would pay a 16-year-old to photograph a wedding? To this day, that's a mystery to me. So by the time it came to school leaving, I was pretty set and pretty determined that I was going to be a photographer. And that was the first time that I came up against this idea that photography was not a good or a suitable career choice. I had my teachers and my parents telling me to do anything other than become a photographer. For various reasons, I was determined, mostly because I'd already been earning pocket money and buying clothes and cameras and whatever for about 3 years. So to me, it was set. I couldn't be deterred. I was definitely going to get into a career in the photographic industry. But it was the first time, that was in 1978, that I had to fight for that. I was sure that photography was a perfectly adequate career. And I imagined it as a way that I would earn a living throughout my life. So I actually became a photographer in the Air Force, aerial photography. And I learned a skill. And I was trained as a sensitometrist. I spent a lot of time on that. That involved exposing film to a controlled amount of light, developing it, and then plotting those results that you would measure on a densitometer to see what the resulting density would be, and creating a curve from that. And from that, you would calculate and work out what was the ASA, the speed of the film, and what was its characteristics and how best to process it. It was a proper hard skill. And when I left the Air Force, it was a skill that I took with me, and it gave me the start in life. I moved to Johannesburg in 1983, I think, and I got a job at a photo lab, and I became a lab technician, mixing chemicals and servicing the photographic industry, the professional photographers of the time. And it seemed to me that everything was good. The career was going well. There was an entire industry built around film, chemicals, developing and printing. And I was really in the thick of it. What I didn't know at the time was this book, Man on Earth. It's full of satellite photographs. It was published in 1983. And the earliest photographs in this book were taken by satellites in 1973. And they were not using film. And this comes as a shock to a lot of people because we see the invention of digital photography as something that happened in the 90s at the earliest. But these photographs in this book were taken in 1973. Prior to that, satellites in orbit would actually eject rolls of film and they'd be caught mid-air by fighter aircraft of the American Air Force. It sounds hard to believe, but that's the actual truth. That's how that was done. So while I was spending a lot of time working on this particular skill set, the seeds of its destruction had already been sown. And that brings us to a very specific problem that photography has always had, and that is technological disruption. There's always been a drive in photography to make it simpler, to make it easier, to make it more accessible to the man in the street. From Kodak's advertising slogan when they came out with the Box Brownie camera, I think in the 1920s, you press the button, Kodak does the rest. And it was later changed to you press the button, Kodak does the rest best when they got some competition. But photography was becoming easier. And with the advent of digital photography was the first time that it appeared that the photographic industry was in serious, serious trouble. So this camera, the Kodak DCS 460, I first came across this in 1995, believe it or not. And there's a bit of a story about this camera. I came back to South Africa in 1995, and I'd been on an extended travel outside of the country, an extended cycling trip. I had in fact ridden a bicycle from Jerusalem to Johannesburg, and when I arrived back in South Africa, I was literally on the bones of my arse. I was completely broke. I didn't own a pair of long pants or a pair of closed shoes. I had a broken down bicycle and absolutely zero money. And I thought, well, not a problem. I would go back to Pro Color or to Beath, where I'd worked for many years, and I'd get a job in the photo industry again. I'd walk into a job. And I visited Pro Color. I went by bicycle, and I went into this lab that at one point had employed 200 people, and there were 4 people left, and they were busy shutting it down. And the lab manager was a lovely guy called Dermot, an Irish bloke. And he said, Martin, it's done. The industry is done. So I got on my bicycle and I rode to Beath. And I'd worked there for a number of years as well. I'd done printing for people like David Goldblatt and Michael Myersfeld. I was really quite good at it. And it was also, it had that feeling of arriving at a party 2 hours after its peak. It was done. They were not hiring. They were retrenching and firing. But as the pro labs in those days always had a notice board, I went and had a look at the one that was at Beath, and there was a photographer looking for an assistant, a lovely man called Alan Kirtland. He'd been a top commercial photographer. And I went to see him and told him that I was now interested in digital photography because I was interested in whatever was killing off the photo labs. And I think because of my interest in digital, he knew what was coming, and he hired me, and he bought a digital camera, the baby brother of this thing. This was a 6 megapixel camera. He'd bought the 1.4 megapixel camera, and they dropped this off at the lab and said, go for it. A Macintosh computer and a Kodak DCS 420. I'd never started a computer up in my life. I had no idea at all. But I had to learn. And I put my back into it. And I worked my butt off. And 3 years later, I picked up a contract to photograph all of the products sold at Macro, Pick and Pay, Trade Center, and Right Value. And for 3 years, that's what I did. With this camera, the DCS 460, 170,000 Rand. About R1 million in today's money. No LCD on the back of it. Used it mostly tethered. It had a battery pack that if you did want to shoot untethered to a computer and not attached to mains power, lasted, I think, 16 frames before it died. And I built my career on this thing. I actually got a loan. I went to a bank with a business plan and I told them what I wanted to do. And I think they just heard Pick and Pay and Macro and they gave me the money. So for 3 years, every single day other than Sundays, I was at that lab from 7 in the morning till 6 at night. I photographed everything that those companies sell. It was quite a job. And in that time, people were saying this digital thing is not going to work out. It's not going to take off. It's never going to compete with film. I'd been at school with a man called Malcolm Ryan, and then later on in the Air Force with him, and then for a brief time I worked for him in Johannesburg when he had a 1-hour lab. And he was at that point head of Fuji sales, I think film sales. And he said to me, it might work for commercial photography, but digital photography would never work for the masses. How could 170,000 Rand for a camera translate ever into something that the man in the street would use, particularly in economically constrained Africa? Film would always rule the roost. We did not see the advent of cell phones, and that price of digital cameras would plummet the way that it did. We didn't see it. Somebody in the industry at a deep and intimate level didn't see that coming. And we had a lot of difficulty getting digital photography into the market. I remembered making a pitch to Hunt Lascaris back in the day, and they had just done a big shoot. I think, I'm not going to say who it was. It was for a big fast food chain. And the person that had done the shoot had made their first foray into digital and had set something incorrectly on the camera. And 3 weeks worth of work with food stylists had resulted in a handful of JPEGs. The person had not set for the correct quality level on the camera, and a 3-week shoot was lost. And Hunt Lascaris, the production manager at Hunt Lascaris, said to me at that time they would never use digital photography. But as we all know, digital photography took over. And we had then another bunch of naysayers, the repro industry, that fought us tooth and nail. And I had somebody very high up in Hurton Carter say that photographers didn't have the business skills to manage this. We were used to buying cameras for 10,000 Rand. We were unused to buying cameras for 170,000 Rand. We didn't know how to finance it. It was the death of commercial photographers that would be run by the repro industry. So the repro industry got that wrong. They're dead, they're gone, they're buried. My career continued. A couple of years later, I was at a party and talking to a printer, a litho printer, and he said much the same. He asked what I did for a living. I said I was a photographer. He laughed. He said, that has to be the worst career choice that anybody's ever made in their lives. He said, it's dead, it's gone. You will be gone. Okay, so printers are basically gone. My career continued. So I had, first of all, school teachers and my parents say, don't go into photography, it's not going to work. They fought me on it. I had to constantly update my own skill set because of technological changes and things like sensitometry that disappeared, black and white printing that disappeared, the advent of digital and a whole lot of skills. And every step of the way, people were telling me I would not be able to earn a living. And I did. I continued to earn a living the whole way through. I made a good living at one point. I was buying luxury Volvos and houses and going on overseas holidays. I thought it wasn't going to end. It just seemed like it would always be like that. Who was going to compete with me and buy 170,000 Rand cameras? In 2005, I bought a camera system from Leaf. I think the entire system cost me 800,000 Rand in 2005. It was a staggering amount of money. I employed 27 people, and there were months that I turned over more than 500,000 Rand a month. Glory days. And then we got another camera. Another camera came out. And that camera was the 560, the Kodak 560. And that camera had an LCD on the back. And we all thought that it was digital photography that would kill off our commercial market. But all that happened was Kodak put a little LCD on the back of a camera. And we didn't realize the implications of it at the time. Because when somebody hires a photographer in the film days, they're managing risk. The number of things that can go wrong when you're shooting film is absolutely staggering. You can, on this camera, for example, you could quite easily forget to load film. You could load the incorrect film. You could load the film incorrectly. You could open the back of the camera before rewinding the film into the cartridge. You could develop it incorrectly. The lab could develop it incorrectly. There were so many things that could go wrong just in that. Then there was no knowing if your exposure was correct. You could shoot a wedding, and instead of setting a 60th of a second on the shutter, you could set 1/25th, and every single photograph would be ruined. You'd have half your exposure correct and the other half dark. Focusing, well, that was done by eye. So what could go wrong? It was actually a miracle that photographs happened with any kind of reliability at all. You had to really be on top of your game. But the moment Kodak put an LCD on the back of a camera, that risk was taken away. Which meant that your technicians in photography, the people that didn't have a creative eye, and there were many of us, but we were good, solid technicians, and we had a job because of it. Suddenly, anybody that had a creative eye could do that job. Because you would shoot, you would look at the LCD and see you'd made a mistake. And you could correct it and move on. No one would ever know. We came up with a term for it. We called it chimping, as in you're like a monkey looking on the back of the camera. But damned if that didn't make us all feel a lot calmer on a shoot. So all that protected us then was that camera entered the market at 160,000 Rand. But notice, 160, 70,000 Rand in 1995. By 2005, you could buy the same quality, possibly better, for the same 170,000 Rand. What I'd bought for 800,000 was off the charts for those days. And that was where it started. Until eventually, what was given away free in a cell phone was actually, in most cases, good enough. So we had technological advances the whole way through that added more and more threat to the industry. It became more and more difficult to justify what you were charging, more and more difficult to justify even employing a full-time photographer. There was no risk to manage. The equipment was now dirt cheap, and the floodgates opened. So having navigated the change from analog to digital, I was pretty comfortable and couldn't imagine any further changes that would take place. But there was another technological change, and that happened to me with the advent of mirrorless cameras. The ability of these things to almost see in the dark, to focus on almost anything without failing. And like the newest camera, the Sony A9 Mark III, shoots 40 frames a second. And the focus is just, it's off the charts. So it was getting easier. There was just no getting around it. But there was another thing that was a problem. And I don't see this mentioned very much. And that thing was the distribution of imagery. If you look at human vision, we think it works like a camera, but it doesn't. You've got about 5 or 6 degrees of sharp color vision in the center of your eye. You build up an image in your mind with your eye scanning and looking at lots of different things and building it up, almost like computational photography. That's how the eye actually works. But the human vision system superpower is movement. You know the thing, there must be 1,000 videos on, maybe 1 million videos on the internet where you got a little laser pointer and you tease a cat and the cat cannot help itself. It chases that little moving dot. And we all think it's really funny that cat's instincts are so strong that something moves like that and it has to follow it. Well, if you ever go to a game reserve, and I know most people in South Africa do, if you're out of South Africa or out of Africa, you probably would like to. But if you ever get to a game reserve, you'll notice that animals, in the presence of humans, freeze. They keep dead still. So this is an evolutionary thing that's taken hundreds of thousands of years to develop, because the animals know instinctively what we seem to not realize, and that is that we are worse than cats at chasing a little laser pointed dot when it comes to motion. If it moves, we see it instantly. While maybe just 5 or 6 degrees in the center of our vision is sharp and color, we see motion right across our vision. The tiniest movement at the edge of your eye, you see it. That's how we're made. And if it moves, before we can think, we look at it. We are motion detectors above everything else. Go to a sports bar and have a drink with some friends, and your eye constantly moves to the TV over somebody's shoulder, whether it's a sport you're interested in or not. If it moves, you watch it. So still photography doesn't have any sense of movement at all. But it had one advantage, and that is it can be printed in magazines, in newspapers, in books, on billboards, on posters. Wherever there's a print, you can get a still photograph. To distribute moving images required, first of all, a cinema, a movie house, and later on TV screens and so on. And those things were rare. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. We would go to the movies once a week if we were lucky. We would go to a drive-in. We didn't have anything with a screen in the house. Not even LCD screens. There were no screens. We listened to the radio with a little pointer dial on it that indicated what frequency we were on. Everything was working like that. There were no screens. But screens are everywhere now, and they're really cheap. And if you have a screen in your hand and somebody wants to sell something to you or show you something, they can put a video clip up on that as easily as they can a still photograph. And everybody knows at that end of the market that motion is going to draw more attention than a still photograph. Back in the day, if you were interested in rugby, you would listen to the match on the radio, and on Monday you'd get the newspaper and turn to the back page and you'd see a photograph, originally in black and white, of one of the players scoring a try. And that would be what you saw. If you wanted to see anything more of rugby, you went to the ground. Who now buys a newspaper to look at the back page to see a photograph when you watch the entire game live on a big screen television in 4K? It doesn't compete. So where are we with photography? Where are we with still photography? For my money, it's done. Every step of the way, every technological change, I've defended this particular occupation and said, no, it's not over. It's not over. There's still a way to make a living. It's still a good way to make a living. And I've been saying that for 51 years now. But today, at the age of 65, I think it's done. That's my honest assessment. I know at the moment people are talking about AI and how AI is going to kill photography. And a long list of things. AI is just the latest thing. Yes, you can generate photographs with it. Yes, and I know that people say, oh, but you can see it's fake. But this story of AI not being good enough and it will never take over is a little bit like the story of Hunt Lascaris getting burned with the food photographer and saying they will never use digital. We're in a transition state now. And yes, sometimes that industry will face plant. But it's not going to stop and it's not going to go away. And I frequently look at photographs and I'm like, is this thing real or not? After 51 years of taking photographs, I already cannot always tell if this thing is AI generated or an actual photograph. And if you throw in Photoshop, and you know that the photograph could have been manipulated with Photoshop, those lines are very blurred. And I can't tell, and I know it's only going to get better and faster. And I don't think anybody actually cares. So if you're going to defend it and say, yes, but actual photography, it's much better, it's authentic, no one cares. That's the truth of it. And it's not AI that's killing photography. Yeah, it's going to chisel away and chip away and take little bits and pieces off. And maybe it's going to kill the retouching industry. But Photoshop was always doing its best to kill that with automated tools and making things simpler and easier. So that's done. The story that comes to mind, and there's two, when people ask, what's going to become of photography and there will always be photography? Yeah, maybe there will always be photography. In much the same way as when Henry Ford invented the Model T and started selling cars, people said, yes, there will always be horses. Yes, there are still horses. You know anyone that goes to work on a horse? Another story is the poet laureate, and this one I think illustrates it a great deal. Poetry is one of those niche things. It used to be culturally quite central in life. You could ask in Victorian England, you know, it was quite well known who was the poet laureate. Every year there was a poet laureate. They would determine who was the top poet for the year, and he would represent that field, and he would have work published, and he would be feted and get a medal. And if you became a poet laureate, your career as a poet was pretty much made. Do you know they still have that title? So it's not about if you say to somebody who's the poet laureate, they won't know. They won't even know that there is such a thing. So will there always be photography? Yeah, I think there will always be photography. In the same way that there will always be horses. Would I recommend somebody to go into the career? I most certainly would not. Definitely not. It's always been a hard career. It's always taken extraordinary dedication and determination. And there was never a guarantee that it was going to be a good living. But you could always make a living from it. And I think now, yeah, it's as dead as poetry, as relevant as a horse in modern life.